So when you think about the fact that what art does to the brain is unlock some of the connections between the different networks that are active, but there are kind of three networks that are at play and kind of take different precedence at different points in time. But those three are generally categorized as the imagination network, the attention network, and your goal-oriented network. And art helps us break down some of the barriers between how those three networks sometimes function. And I could explain that, but it's much clearer and much more intuitive to appreciate that when you just look at the art. What happens when you unlock that imagination, when you let go of some of that, goal-oriented self-control. These magical moments appear that let us connect to kind of deeper thoughts that then affect our both mental and physical health.
Welcome to Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. My name is Daniel H. Gillison Jr. I'm the CEO for NAMI and your host for this podcast. I want to start out by mentioning the title of this podcast, and it's the Healing Power of Art. And as we talk about the healing power of art, let me give you a little bit of the description of the episode. Art can help us process past experiences, explore our emotions, and expand our perspectives. In this episode, I am joined by NAMI Ambassadors and artists Alex Alpert and Pepper Auerbach, as well as the Franklin Institute's Jayatri Das. Welcome to all three of you. Together, they discuss how art impacts mental health, as well as the connection between physical and mental health. Alex and Pepper will have artwork presented in the Franklin Institute's upcoming exhibition, Body Odyssey, in part about how science can help all of us find balance in our mental and physical health. We're so happy to have all three of them with us. And as we start this, and we'll get into introductions about them and who they are and what they do in a second, but let me start out about why this podcast. And we started this podcast because we believe that hope starts with us. And there's 5 elements of this. Hope starts with us talking about mental health. Hope starts with us making information accessible. Hope starts with us providing resources and practical advice. Hope starts with us sharing our stories. And hope starts with us breaking the stigma. If you or a loved one is struggling with a mental health condition and have been looking for hope, we made this podcast for you. Hope starts with all of us. Hope is a collective. We hope that each episode with each conversation brings you into that collective so you know you're not alone. So a little bit more about exploring the healing impact of art. Art therapy can provide a way to express emotions and experiences not easily expressed in words. Art can be healing through the process of making art. The journey of creating and feeling is more important than the destination, the final finished piece. Art therapy can reduce distress, help build self-esteem, and support development of social skills and emotional resilience. NAMI did a research study along with the Adobe Foundation that showed that there is a powerful connection between creativity and mental health. Some of the findings included 63% that said creativity can improve confidence in abilities. 61% said creativity can reduce feelings of stress or anxiety, and 57% say creativity can improve mental well-being. Now, our guest, Alex Alpert, pronouns he and him; Pepper Auerbach, pronouns they, them; Jayatri Das, she, her. To all three of you, welcome. So Alex Alpert and Pepper Auerbach are NAMI ambassadors and artists by education and career. Alex created a live art piece at the NAMICon convention and has worked with a number of brands, including Adobe, Nike, and the Grammys. Pepper is a graduate of the School of Visual Arts. Pepper created art last year for our partners at Publicis. Alex and Pepper were both at NAMICon 2024, and they collaborated on our remembrance tree. Thank you for doing that. Jayatri Das is from the Franklin Institute. She is a chief bioscientist and the director of science content at the Franklin Institute. She's joining us because she has coordinated with NAMI staff to source art pieces for an upcoming exhibition, Body Odyssey, highlighting health and the human body. As the World Health Organization has said, and Dr. David Satcher had coined years ago, there is no physical health without mental health. So that's what this is about. We hope the exhibit will help visitors appreciate how human biology balances different systems and functions, how new technologies shape new ways we think, and how science can help all of us make smart decisions about our mental and physical health. Part of the exhibit explores a range of perspectives on art therapy and celebrates careers in mental health. And it will offer the opportunity to explore how art therapy can offer new and healthy ways of pursuing inner balance. And we all need that. The exhibit name is Body Odyssey. The exhibit dates, it opens on the 23rd of November, and we'll ask more about how long the exhibit will be there in just a minute. So I just wanted to start out by thanking Jayatri for her leadership, her vision, and her bringing our exhibit to the Franklin Institute. To Alex and Pepper, you didn't have to get on the plane and come out to Denver to be with us. Thank you for doing that. And thank you for being such great ambassadors and advocates for NAMI. It takes all of us, and we appreciate it so much. Thank you for your work. So with that said, I'm going to start out with this first question, and that was a long setup, but I wanted to make sure you knew how much we appreciate all three of you and what you do. So can each of you tell us a little bit about how you think art can help find balance between mental and physical health? Let's start out with the bioscientist. Jayatri?
I was hoping you'd ask. Yeah, I think, Dan, you really set it up. There is no mental and physical health without each other. And I think the more that we've been learning about the science of how our bodies work and how our brains work, the more we're understanding the physiological connections that unite those two. Like, we know that, even when you exercise, your brain is releasing hormones that make you feel better, which then make you want to exercise more. And so it's that great feedback loop to feel healthy about it. And the same is true, when you're not feeling healthy about it, that physical and mental illness are also connected. And I think being able to talk about the mental aspects of it gives us new insights into the physiology of it.
Jayatri, thank you so much. So let's go to Alex. Can you tell us a little bit about how you think art can help find balance between mental and physical health? And not only can, but does.
Yeah, thanks so much for having me here. I've been drawing my whole life and, only relatively recently made it my profession. Before that, drawing was really many things to me. It was, obviously a form of expressing how I'm feeling. It was and is a coping mechanism to help me through issues with anxiety and depression, a form of communication, with people in my life or people I don't even know personally. And it's a way for me to try to help people as well, by kind of communicating things that I think are important. Since it's become my profession, a lot of other kind of factors get thrown in when it becomes your job. But I've really wanted to focus on my work with NAMI, educational organizations that I'm a part of, to try to impart that on young people of all ages, really, to try to, show them that drawing for me, but really any kind of visual arts, even music, any way of expressing yourself, just be a really valuable tool in, making your way through life.
Yeah, thank you, Alex. And I'm going to come back to you in just a minute because I loved what I've seen about your free-flowing work. So I want to come back and ask a question about that. But Pepper, as a graduate of the School of Visual Arts, you're putting words on paper, but you also put art on paper, and words are art. And I just wanted to ask you this question. How do you think art can help and does help find balance between mental and physical health?
Well, for me, art has always been very therapeutic. I'm sure it has been for many people. It's therapy. And it's been very meditative for me. It's been very helpful to clear my head and help me understand that things are more simple than we think they are. And I think that it's always been very helpful to me to be able to draw my feelings out, to write out autobiographical stories like the one I'm working on now. It's been a meditative experience to be able to express what I'm thinking in that way.
Thank you, Pepper. Alex, you've been called a stream of consciousness illustrator and known for the free-flowing lines and the detailed shading. I got to see some of that. I'm saying the words, but I'm visualizing what I got to see at NAMICon. And it's almost like you grab the instrument, if you will, and you start. And I'm like, does Alex have this in his head already? When you create, Alex, what do you follow? What's the feeling, the thought, the theme? And do you receive some type of catharsis or relief through this creation. And all of us that are standing back watching are like, how does he do what? And then all of a sudden the visual is there.
Yeah. Well, I think Pepper said something really important, which is kind of like the meditative aspect of it, especially that, stream of consciousness way of illustrating. For me, I didn't always draw that way. I used to do realism and portraits and landscapes, and that kind of drawing and creation wasn't, for me, very cathartic. I was very much a perfectionist and needed to look a certain way. I was never really satisfied. It wasn't until 4 or 5 years ago I kind of decided to embrace this kind of more free-flowing creation where I'm not really planning it, just starting with lines and shapes. Eventually, they kind of form imagery that you and I might identify as something, a face, a building, whatever. Then I just kind of branch off of that I felt all of a sudden like that kind of meditative, cathartic feeling where it didn't necessarily matter, what it was that I'm drawing or how it looks. It's about the act of expression. You come up with techniques to kind of like make it look aesthetic, at least to you. But, once I embraced that, it was like, I can't really make a mistake. And whatever happens. And, if something looks a certain way, it's not vibing with your vision, you can kind of shift it and like change the direction of it. And that is when it became very meditative. And I was able to kind of identify that because when I do it, still, even when it's like a job, time goes by crazy fast, which is always kind of how I'm like, oh, okay, this is like something I'm enjoying. It becomes a problem when you have a deadline for a year or something and you're like, it's been 10 hours and I still have this much more to go. But yeah, that kind of drawing, even if it's not your specialty, and I know plenty of tremendously talented artists who do realist portraits and, landscapes and things like that. I often encourage them, anybody, to like sometimes just try this kind of like freestyle drawing where you're not really thinking about anything in particular, but you're inspired maybe by something in your subconscious or people around you or music that you're listening to. And I think that's a really kind of valuable way of expressing yourself and maybe in more of a raw way.
Alex, you mentioned a couple of things. You said up until 4 or 5 years ago, you were a perfectionist, and then you let go of that. And you know that in this new work that you do, you can't make a mistake. So what was that evolution for you? Because there's others, peers, they're living their lives where they feel in their life they have to be a perfectionist. And we know that there's no such thing as perfection. What was that turning point for you to say, I can let go of perfection for this, and I know I can't make a mistake now?
Yeah, it's a freeing thing. I also don't want to pretend that I'm never not self-critical or, think something looks exactly the way I want it to. But on the whole, I think the turning point was like I was working another job full time at the time and was just kind of drawing for fun. And I think I was like still living in Los Angeles and was on the beach, was just kind of drawing the landscape around me. And I was thinking like it doesn't need to look exactly like I'm seeing it. And it was very much just for me. And I liked how it looked. And it also turned into this very abstract, weird, like not at all what I was seeing. And it almost kind of like removed itself from what I was looking at. It was just kind of stuff that was going on in my head. And I liked it. And that was really the thing that clicked was I liked it. And the more I did it, I did get better at it. There are kind of techniques to it. Even if it is freestyle and there's no mistakes, there is kind of methods I use. But I always feel good about it. And the funny thing happened, and I think other artists and performers, whatever, can identify with this, probably anybody, like once you feel kind of good about it or confident about it, people also kind of respond to it positively. Like, because I think they can sense when it is a subjective thing like art, people kind of play off your energy and they can kind of sense that you feel confident about it and good about it. So they're like, oh, I like this too. And that's kind of like I embraced that. So I really kind of leaned into this thing where, again, I don't always feel like it's perfect or great about it, but I feel confident about what I created. And it was what I wanted to make at this time. And that's, I think, what allowed me to also make it a career, make it a profession, because if I was being a perfectionist about everything, I don't think I could, keep my sanity doing it professionally every day. So yeah, that's kind of the moment, more or less, but still, it's very much a journey still, and, ups and downs.
Well, your work is engaging and you are still a bit of a perfectionist. I get it, just in a different venue, if you will. I see it. The lines and the work is clean. It's engaging. It brings you in. And it's almost, as I watch it, it's almost like mind mapping. It's just really cool to see how you envision it. And then for the layperson like myself to stand back and watch it be created. Kudos to you for that and for sharing that. So Pepper, your art style includes traditional and digital cartooning, storytelling, and edited photography. You also incorporate some horror genre as well as children's literature to teach them important lessons about self-love. So you do a lot to make such a big difference in different communities. What does art truly mean to you, and how has creating your art shaped your views about mental health?
Thank you. I've always made art, even when I was a kid. I've always been drawing monsters and creepy things, but I think a lot of that has been to express. I have schizoaffective disorder, and I express a lot of my hallucinations and things like that through my art. And I think it's been very therapeutic for me. I think I learned to be more kind to myself about that. Art means to me that I can share my experiences with other people, and I've always wanted to help people in that way. I've always wanted to help people understand that it's not as simple as mental illness is bad. I think it's much more complicated than that. And I think that with my experiences, I have learned to accept a lot of what I deal with and also get help for the things that I have a hard time with.
You can see this over my back. These are some of our values. So from awareness to advocacy to compassion, one of those is inclusion. And Pepper, you're very inclusive in terms of the work that you do, from children's literature to digital cartooning to storytelling and edited photography. So this hits so many, it seems to be very inclusive. Was that by chance, or was that something that you saw that you wanted to do?
Well, I think representation is very important, and I think it's vital. I'm non-binary, and I'm a queer person, and I feel like in order for us to really gain a sense of acceptance with ourselves, then I think we need to see people like ourselves in media. With my stories, I do a lot of inclusion because, even with horror, it's still important to see yourself in a character. As long as the character is good. If the character is well written, then that's great. But we also need to have characters that are reflective of who we are in every aspect of ourselves.
Thank you. Jayatri, I want to come to you for a minute and ask a question that I know our audience will love to know. First of all, thank you for your leadership and for bringing this exhibit, Body Odyssey. What made you decide on this exhibit? And then the next question is, can you tell the audience a little bit about a bioscientist?
Sure. So this exhibit came to be because health has always been one of the Franklin Institute's core platforms when we talk about science and society. So some of your audience may or may not know that the Franklin Institute has had an iconic 2-story walk-through giant heart as one of our exhibits since 1954. But we recognize that the conversation and how we talk about health is always changing. And so this new exhibition keeps that giant heart as the centerpiece of the exhibit, but really aimed to reflect, the importance of different issues in health that we're dealing with today in 2024. And we started the process of developing the exhibit by talking to kids. We talked to kids from, middle school, high school, and with every group that we talked to, their number one area of interest was mental health. And I think that really says a lot, both in terms of where our conversations of mental health are evolving, but also, what's on kids' minds these days. And so we really wanted to make sure that this was a topic that we addressed honestly and productively while giving people that connection point to bring in their own experiences.
Thank you. And I will say that I've been to the Franklin Institute as a dad of a middle school student. I was one of those parents that was on the bus from my daughter's middle school all the way up to Philadelphia to the Franklin Institute to actually walk through that heart and to actually spend a real good amount of time there back in, I won't date myself, but it was in the early 90s. So I know it. So thank you for that. If you don't mind, because our audience always has an opportunity to learn about different fields. So a bioscientist.
So my role, my role as the museum's bioscientist is to talk about a wide spectrum of topics that affect how we as human beings interact with the world around us every day. So centering those conversations on the interactions between our biology and the environment around us, and thinking about how our bodies, our brains, how new technologies, the social environment and physical environment that we live in all interplay.
That's fantastic. We have a resource here at NAMI called Hearts and Minds, and it's really looking at that connective tissue between the organs and the mind. And it's called Hearts and Minds, and it's really looking at that correlation between the physical and the mental and everything that's connected from the standpoint of navigating. So yeah, I appreciate that.
And I think one of the beautiful things about working at a museum is art plays into a lot of what we do in how we explain science and help people make connections to science. And as I was listening to Alex and Pepper just talk about your different processes and the approaches that you take, and especially when I first saw your work, that share many common themes, but also look very different. One of the things that I love about being able to include your work in the exhibit is that just seeing your art helps people understand the explanation of some of the science that we're trying to convey. So when you think about the fact that, what art does to the brain is unlock some of the connections between the different networks that are active, right? So you have an imagination network, you have this attention network, you have this goal-oriented network. And art helps us break down some of the barriers between how those three networks sometimes function. And I could explain that, but it's much clearer and much more intuitive to appreciate that when you just look at the art that Alex and Pepper are creating to see, what happens when you unlock that imagination, when you let go of some of that, goal-oriented self-control, that, these magical moments appear that let us connect to kind of deeper thoughts that then affect our both mental and physical health.
So Jayatri, would you repeat those networks? I think that was really cool.
Yeah. So our brain is always changing, always active, but there are kind of three networks that are at play and kind of take different precedence at different points in time. But those three are generally categorized as the imagination network, the attention network, and your goal-oriented network.
That is fantastic. And when you talk about imagination, attention, and goal, these two NAMI ambassadors here have the imagination, they have the attention, and they're very goal-oriented. And they're so supportive of NAMI. We can't thank them enough. And as we get ready to wrap up, the other thing I want to say is that we know this is about leadership. And Jayatri, I want to thank you for your leadership there and your advocacy for this exhibit on behalf of NAMI at the Franklin Institute, because I know you get a lot of different opportunities for exhibits, and for you to choose this one, we're very appreciative of that. So I can't wait to come up and to see it myself.
Well, I want to express my gratitude to NAMI as well, because, our goal is to present science and stories in authentic as a way as possible, and being able to connect with people like Pepper and Alex and everybody else at NAMI who has played a role in our exhibit development process. It really makes the exhibit as strong and as connected to the community as we want it to be.
That's outstanding. So thank you for that. And before we conclude, I'd like to ask a question which we ask to every guest for every podcast. The world can be a difficult place, and sometimes it can be hard to hold on to hope. That's why with each episode, we dedicate the last couple of minutes of our podcast to a special segment called Hold On to Hope. And so I want to ask each of you, what helps you hold on to hope?
For me, probably the people around me, my partner, my most friends. I'm lucky to have a pretty strong support system in my life of people who recognize me for who I am, how I do express myself, validate my goals and my feelings, and also are, patient with ups and downs that I think everybody experiences. So that is a consistent source of hope for me, is just the kind of people I have around me in life.
Thank you, Alex. Pepper?
I get lonely sometimes. I feel alone because I have schizoaffective disorder, as I mentioned, and I don't know that many people who also have this, who have been through psychotic episodes or anything like that. And so really it's about, for me, building community. And I've done that a lot on social media and stuff like that. I also think that, main two thoughts that I try to think when I'm low on hope are that I try to remember good days that I've had. And I try to remember that those kinds of days will happen again. Maybe even try to recreate a day like that, spend a day with a friend that you spent with on that day. Try to connect to people. And I think my other thought is when I'm not as energized artistically, I consider those periods a waiting period. It's very much just time for me to relax, not overwork myself, try not to focus on art as much because, sometimes you just don't have the energy for it. And I think that's really valuable time that you can spend with family, with friends, whoever you really trust, really. And you could go to the park, you could do whatever you want. Listen to music. I mean, I've been listening to a lot of music lately on walks and stuff, and it's just so relaxing. With art, it's really important to give yourself time.
Thank you. And you give yourself grace to be yourself and to understand what works best for you when. Thank you for sharing, Pepper. Jayatri, I want to come to you.
I think for me, I always try to listen to learn, and that brings me a lot of hope. I'm lucky to be in a place that values so many different people's perspectives, and I'm a storyteller, and I want to hear other people's stories and represent those stories in the work that we do. And people are endlessly interesting. And hearing about, the good work that people are doing and the creative things that people are doing, we're not in this alone. And that really brings me a lot of hope.
Yeah, thank you. Yeah. Every now and then the tables get turned and people ask me, well, Dan, what helps you hold on to hope? I love the industry of people. And I remember in college, someone once told me, she said, Dan, there will be times where you'll be lonely. You'll never be alone. Those lonely times are really interesting because I love the industry of people. I love connecting with people. I love learning from people. And there are those moments where it feels like during COVID, that there's these walls around you can't navigate. So it's something that you have to be in touch with. And what helps me hold on to hope is knowing that there are people that you can interact with that really are about the whole, and really trying to look at whole health from the standpoint of how are you really doing, and making sure that, when we say you're not alone, that's real. So that's something that is important to me. And the other thing that has me hold on to hope is young people, because myself and others that are in the space will be over here to the side, and we will need young leaders to be in this work. And I'm very inspired, and what gives me hope is the young people that are lending their voice and speaking about mental health and lending their art to this work. So that gives me a lot of hope, because there was a time when that was not something that was happening. And also for leaders like Jayatri at the Franklin Institute to say, hey, it's both and, it's not either or. I'm telling you straight up, that absolutely gives me hope. So with that said, I want to come back to Jayatri to talk about the exhibit, Body Odyssey. It's opening on the 23rd of November. Would you like to share something with our audience about the exhibit? And would love for you to do that before we wrap up.
Sure. We really take a lot of pride in opening this new exhibit, because it is an exhibit that brings together a lot of social experiences. This is something that we want people to do together, but it also brings a lot of personal connections. That's one of the reasons that art therapy felt like such a perfect fit for the exhibit, because people can be creative right there in the exhibit. You can play with art, you can draw, you can make music, and make those connections to how that affects your mental health, while also, still running through the giant heart and playing with, how AI is affecting health. And, it tells a lot of different stories. So it's going to be around for a while. This is not just a temporary exhibition. This is one of our core platforms at the museum moving forward. So we're just so incredibly honored that we can include Pepper and Alex's art in the exhibit, along with other contributions to really give people that story about art therapy. And we hope that you'll all come to Philadelphia after November 23rd and come visit.
Yeah, let's get out, get up, get around, get to the Franklin Institute. So that's what we got to do. So as we go to wrap up, let me just say to all three of you, thank you so very much for what you do, why you do it, and how you do it, and for your leadership and being the force amplifiers and multipliers that you are. So really appreciate that. This has been Hope Starts With Us, a podcast by NAMI, the National Alliance on Mental Illness. If you are looking for mental health resources, you're not alone. To connect with the NAMI HelpLine and to find local resources, visit nami.org/help. Text HelpLine to 62640 or dial 800-950-NAMI or 6264. Or if you are experiencing an immediate suicide, substance use, or mental health crisis, please call or text 988 to speak with a trained support specialist or visit 988lifeline.org. I'm Dan Gillison. Thanks for listening and be well.